Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Sweet Home. So, I think right around perfectly when this show came out, I think I was kind of interested in seeing this show because I kind of heard it was kind of like a zombie kind of show, and like I kind of felt like maybe like the zombies might be like these specialty kind of zombies that has something unique about them. But when I started to just kind of watch this show, like all of a sudden I started to realize, I'm like, is this exactly like hashtag Alive or like the Netflix Alive zombie film? Where I was like, please don't let this be just copy and paste just like that. Because I've seen that movie and I'm like, I don't need to see like the show version of that movie. And so that was kind of my real like hesitation. And plus, like the pilot episode, like it does have a slow build, but then eventually it does have pretty decent payoffs within the very first pilot episode. You just have to kind of wait till the tail end of this episode to eventually get to like the like get through all the day one crap to eventually just go, oh hey, here's a zombie, and oh hey, like some person that you probably have lived next to, oh they're gonna become a zombie, and you're gonna just have to deal with that, and like so. Here's the thing. So we start to see a bunch of people who just have these weirdly gusher of a nosebleeds. And so are we to assume that every single one of these people that bizarrely have a hefty amount of nosebleeds, are all of them just going to all become zombies at this point? Could we get to that conclusion? Yes? No? Or maybe does the nosebleed thing, like, is that just going to happen to everyone? But not everyone is going to become a zombie. I'm not quite sure yet. I only watched one episode. Here's also the thing. I might not perfectly go into mentioning everyone's name right off the bat in this review. I might just go, if somebody has a certain unique character trait about them, I might just go about that instead of actually going into names. Like, I try to dodge and I dip and duck and avoid to try and go into actual names, especially right off the bat. And plus, there's a lot of times where it's like, hey, if this is to be convenient for me to just not have to say a person's name, then I avoid it. Because I know, like, especially with a series like this, I'm going to butcher and ill pronounce a number of names. So I'm gonna try. I have a cast list here, so I'm gonna try to hopefully name off some of these characters. But like for this one, I'm just gonna go into it light. So teeing it up, what is this show seemingly about? Well, we end up having this apartment complex where it seems that there seems to be some very unique kind of characters that they start to build on to give you some kind of mystery. We seemingly have some guy who is to come off to me like a detective, who is to be a guy who is seemingly in his apartment building, interrogating someone. And I'm just like, okay, so, like, is this some random dude who's just squeezing some other random dude for information? And now, basically, since the world is ending, like, what is the point of this guy squeezing this other guy for information for? Because the world's gonna end. We end up having one guy who is to seemingly want his life to end before the world is to end. But eventually, I guess this guy, seemingly towards the end of this pilot episode, may or may not get his wish, let's just say. So, uh, so all of a sudden we end up having the cluster of this apartment complex. Uh, Eventually, we kind of start to find kind of random apartment characters who are slowly but surely showing cases of severe nosebleed. We end up having this security guard that seems to be getting some fish that he thinks is going to be delish, and then he ends up quickly getting a nosebleed for whatever reason. So I don't know what it is. Like, I don't quite understand exactly. Like, usually there's some kind of zombie movie cases where it's all certain kinds of food or something that could trigger this, or like, so I'm trying to figure out exactly what, like the starting off or popping off of someone eventually becoming a zombie, or is it just eventually a mood point, or maybe it's something in the air, or maybe it's just like this town, everyone is eventually going to easily become a zombified thing, because there is this whole like scene in the very beginning of this pilot episode where it's like, so is the very first scene in the pilot episode going to tell us how this all plays out already? And so I don't want to know that. They shouldn't have given me that scene to probably tell me how this is all going to eventually play out. Because no, I don't like that at all. Because that's what I feel is going to happen. But I guess it's just like, hey, enjoy the ride, enjoy the story. But I'm like, no, like, don't do that. Don't, just no, no. Anyways, but I guess in this movie, you probably shouldn't invest in anybody, anyways. So, uh, but yeah, so like, I'm kind of interested in like how this is to all go to so to speak, all to be a big bag of that's gonna just not work out, and all these people in this apartment complex are all gonna just turn into zombies, because it feels like these people make the mistake of just going like, oh, like it's kind of weird that we end up having like this hotel lockdown. That's kind of weird, right? We might as well just unlock the hotel to eventually realize that, yeah, maybe we should relock down the hotel, because this seems like we're all probably gonna die soon, right? So yeah, so I guess nobody was watching the news, or it doesn't really seem like the only real communication that it seems like anyone is to have with the outside world is really just the one gamer guy who is to basically like be scheduling when his life is to end. And so it seems that people are to mention about their nosebleeds and that they should go to the hospital right away. But heaven forbid you should be able to quickly be able to read any number of dialogue when it comes into a dubbed over show, because that's the one problem I always have is I'm like, dude, I cannot read fast enough. Like, man, I could, like, if they were to have like spoken this dialogue, I would have gotten that. But I can't. When it comes down to dubbed shows and dialogue, I'm just like, what was that? Like, I read like a good, like, I think I got a third of that, but there was like one sentence. So, like, there's a lot of times where I have to pause and go back, and then I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so I have to kind of like pause down the dialogue and get it that way, or reasonably, just just think that I got the gist of it. So, because also the dialogue like through this pilot episode doesn't usually matter. So, anyways, yeah. So we have some interesting characters, and it seems that there is some interesting traits to be involved with certain kinds of these characters. We end up having some kind of smart or intelligent characters being put into this apartment complex. So we'll see how this eventually all folds out. The girl who is holding the axe seems to be a firefighter, so that's kind of interesting. And the guy who's holding the small hammer onto his shoulder, I think is a detective, but like it just seems like he stereotypically has that look or that kind of thing to me. That doesn't certify like he didn't toss out a badge at any point in time. And of course, the middle guy with kind of the stick thing is to, of course, be the kid who is to eventually kind of count down the days before the end of his life until end of time is to happen. And then he's like, well, maybe, like, I bet he's like, maybe I should just live throughout this whole thing unless, like, I get a huge nosebleed. So, yeah. Let me do a reset here for a second. All right. So, so really most of this first episode is to start to get to know some of the apartment people, because this is like the day one crap, and we kind of have to just like start to figure out a way to invest in random people until we actually get to the whole, hey, the world's going to end and these people are going to die, so why did I have to invest in all these people? Because I know good and well that they're probably going to be dead within X amount of episodes, because that's bound to happen. Because in a zombie apocalypse, people are going to end up dead. People are going to make stupid mistakes. People are going to be like, oh, well, I think that I can go out there and I think I can survive and I think that I should just go, let's go grocery shopping or something like. And then they're dead. They're easily dead. Because a lot of people just don't understand what's going on, and then people make stupid mistakes. So, with that said, let's go on to spoiler time of this show. Because, like, anything that I'm to say here is to basically spoil the whole pilot episode, anyways, and I only watched one episode. Hopefully, when I'm to get more in depth about this, which hopefully means I'll probably be able to watch more than one episode, that's probably bound to happen. It probably won't be tomorrow because I know I'll probably be reviewing Heels tomorrow. And that might be the taking up space of one of my usual TV show watching, but I watched two shows today, so who knows. Anyways, uh, let's go on into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we spoil this episode. So, we end up having uh, a beginning sequence where all of a sudden it's to be in this snowy environment, and so all of a sudden we end up having this one guy who is to be running around in the streets of Calcutta, wherever this setting is. I always say Calcutta because it's a funny word. So this guy has to be running around, or kind of just be slowly walking through this town, and it seems that all these zombies are just kind of like almost crawling after him, but it seems like they all can't move for whatever reason, because maybe they're frozen down to the ground because it's winter. So all of a sudden there's to be this military force, that seems that there's a huge military force there, that is to all of a sudden see this kid moving throughout the streets. And so there's to be this I guess this guy in the megaphone is like, hey, like hands up, kid. Stop where you are. And so this kid just continues to keep on moving, and so they're just like, well, open fire. So they all like a bunch of guys, all or a bunch of police officers or military force or whoever, just start opening up bullets into this guy, and he just continues to keep on walking, and his eyes end up turning black, and then like he seems to just keep on walking, like his eyes turn black, but then it seems like he's like something's happening. I don't know why. Like this guy is getting so riddled with bullets. I'm very confused. So, like that's bizarrely the opening sequence of the show to, I guess, maybe possibly tell us where this eventual apartment complex is all going to end in a horrific way. So, anyways, back I guess to X amount of days before the world went to crap. So we end up having this guy who is to walk back into his apartment complex, and all of a sudden there is to be these signs mentioning about kind of like a going green kind of environment, and like a going green kind of apartment complex, and like, hey, like we're the best hotel apartment complex for the environment, and blah blah blah. So all of a sudden, who I believe is Cha Hyun Soo, Cha Hyun Soo. I'm probably pronouncing that because I'm horrible at pronunciation. So, Hyun Soo I guess I'll call him that because that sounds fun. Hyun Soo is to eventually just kind of make his way, and all of a sudden there ends up being a guy who has this. God, it's not like a. I think, yeah, it's a weed whacker. And so all of a sudden this guy is like weed whacking. All of a sudden this like this blade from this weed whacker comes flying off the weed whacker because it broke off, and it goes and it flies and it hits this sign right next to where this guy almost was, and so the security guy is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like I didn't see you there, and plus also I didn't realize that this freaking blade was gonna break off." So all of a sudden the guy's like, "Well, no problems, it didn't kill me." So pushing on. But the security guy asked the guy, it's like, "Hey, do you live alone?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm so alone." I'm like, "What? Are you some like emo guy?" Like it feels like he's so emo. I'm just waiting for him to like flip his hair at some point because he's so emo. Uh, so so pushing on. So we end up having this security guard in this apartment complex. That Hyun Soo uh, is to be seemingly not registered for. And so we end up having the security guard, and this guy is complaining that the security guard is to have a bed in his room, like his like security room. And so the security guard is like, "Well, why why shouldn't I have a bed in here? Like, when am I not going to be able to get all the rest that I need?" And so this guy is like, "Really?" So he ends up like walking off because it's like, "God, I guess you were like the crappiest person at your job." So all of a sudden we end up having this other woman who's like, "Well, yeah, like if anything, none of the security guards had beds in their security place, so I don't know why you have one, because they're lazy as f." So this girl is mentioned, it's like, "Well, hey, like I guess because you're doing such a great job." uh She ended up mentioning that evidently she was to be shipped to her some fish, but it's not the fish that she likes. So uh, the girl ends up giving this guy, the security guy, this fish. He's like, "Oh, great, thanks for giving me dinner." And so all of a sudden, the guy opens up this box that has fish in it. And I guess all of a sudden, this is to be dead fish because obviously there's flies like that are like all around it. So we also have this security guard who's like instant nose bleeding. He's like covering up. He's like, "Oh, what a gusher!" So he ends up putting like something into his nose, and so then eventually he starts to go to room to room to room, and eventually he bumps back into uh, Hyun Soo, and is to mention like, "Hey, like it seems like you aren't registered, uh, so hopefully you'll do that soon. Hopefully you'll come to my office and you'll get registered for like you living here." And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that soon. Like I'll be right on it." Like pretty much by the time that this guy will go and off himself, like I'm thinking registering is the last of his worries. So uh so this security guard is very weird. He's consistently looking into the eye hole of this guy's like apartment room, and so eventually this guy has to look back out there and just kind of see this guy just standing out there, just kind of like just completely oblivious. So all of a sudden there's to be this girl out there that is mentioning about some acting gig, and I guess that is to be Hyung Soo's neighbor. And so eventually that character will get really interesting at some point in this episode. So Hyung Soo is to eventually go to the roof of his building to eventually you just kind of like put one foot off the edge of this rooftop, and so all of a sudden he ends up seeing a girl there that is to uh, be practicing ballet, and all of a sudden she ends up accidentally stepping on gum, and she's like, "Oh, is this yours?" And he's like, "No." So she's going like, "Well, must have been some bum." So eventually she starts talking to this guy, and she's to mention it's like, "Oh, well, uh, like are you alone kind of thing, like handsome guys probably shouldn't be alone or whatever." So eventually she mentions it's like, "Oh, by the way, like don't go and jump off this building because it just creates a burden for everybody else at this apartment complex. So like if you're gonna go and jump off a building, go on some other person's building so that way they have to deal with it." It's like, really? So this guy goes back in his room and is to continue to eat ramen just nonstop, and is to start gaming. And all of a sudden, like there's some comments on his gaming thing about no people having nosebleeds and all kinds of stuff. So so eventually, what ends up happening here? Let's get to the like other people in this apartment complex. So there seems to be this number of people kind of going through this elevator. Let's cover that. So we end up having one person in this apartment complex who is a bass player, and it seems like she's probably a burden to all of her neighbors because of her bass playing, her heavily just practicing, and just like, God, why does a person have to go and be in an apartment complex and be a bass player? Why, God, why? So, this girl is to eventually, I guess, probably get complaints because why wouldn't she? Uh, and so one of her neighbors that is to, I guess, be strolling out this stroller with no baby in it, weirdly, is to mention this girl like, "Oh, hey, yeah, I heard you last night," and she's like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I am a little bit too loud." She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." So eventually, when the bass player girl notices that this girl has no baby in her stroller, immediately when this girl gets into the elevator with her stroller, the bass player is like, "Dude, I'm not going to go into the elevator with that woman. She's evidently lost her mind." And so all of a sudden, we end up having this. We also have like the bass player who wants to go back for her wallet or have some excuse to not be in the elevator with this woman. And so the woman is like, "Well, hey, I'll wait for you. Like, I'll keep the door open." And the girl is just like, "Nah, I'll get the next one because you're crazy." So, uh, one guy is walking by, and it's supposedly a teacher of sorts, and so supposedly this guy is to have a Bible in his hand because supposedly it's Sunday and like he is to go to church. So we have this whole line of dialogue where like these two are to get to know one another. I'm like, okay, is this going to pay out somewhere down the road? Probably not. Because I think this teacher eventually is at like this one place, kind of getting some certain kind of studies and stuff like that. So I don't know if he ended up coming back to the apartment complex or not, but we'll have to figure that out. So uh, the bass player is to go off the elevator, and then the supposed teacher is to like kind of be out of the elevator next, bumping into seemingly a guy that is to have some kind of green tape into his bag, which ends up falling out of it, to where the guy just kind of looks and like, well, should I say something? Should I not say something? Who cares? Let's walk away. So this guy who supposedly has this stereotypical look to him of a detective is to supposedly go into his apartment complex and is to have a chair over a guy's chest, having one part of this chair like just having all of his weight onto this guy because he's interrogating him supposedly, or really just torturing this guy. I guess because something that he did. So eventually, this guy is to rip off the tape, and so this guy's like, I don't know why that you're doing this. I don't know why that you're like I just don't know. Like whatever we're doing here, I don't know. What do you want? So eventually this guy is to show this other guy this phone, and then he is to take his cigarette and to put this cigarette in this guy's mouth and force him to chew it, or to chew on it. And I'm like, God, this is so awful. But it also seems like this guy's eye is to all of a sudden just like seemingly be like having some red within it. So I'm like, is this taped up guy eventually going to become a zombie sometime soon? We'll have to see. So, uh, so let's get back with the Hyung Soo. So what ends up happening is the guy is playing games, just minding his own business, and so all of a sudden he ends up getting a like a text, I guess, from probably the one of the people that work in this apartment complex mentioning that they had left a package in front of his door, and so he's like, "Okay, cool. That must be the ramen that I quickly asked that I had mailed to me." So all of a sudden, Hyun Soo is to eventually go on to get his package to realize that someone had decided to go and rip it open and leave a trail of ramen for him to find, to eventually find out that it's one of his neighbors that is all of a sudden seemingly very, very hungry, because she is to be in the other room kind of watching her cat eat, as she herself is to be starving herself, I guess getting prepared for some acting gig, which it seems like it's not quite easily working out. So all of a sudden, we end up having Hyun Soo following this trail to eventually see in this open door a head of this woman's cat that she grabs and drags into her apartment. And for me too, I'd be like, oh no, I'm gonna go back into my room, call 411 to ask like, hey, how do you call 911? Cause this woman is eating her cat and I'm just so confused at this point. So all of a sudden his neighbor, the crazy woman who quite possibly had maybe have eaten or nibbled on her cat, is coming on down to this guy's apartment room. And so I'm like, wait a minute. So, like, this guy has a door, but he also has this, like, video conference thing, like, phone kind of thing at his door. That seems weird, where there's, like, a phone that has this, like, video thing where you can kind of see the person outside the room. Why didn't he have that going on before when he was kind of looking at that security guard or guy or whatever? Anyways, mood point. So all of a sudden, like, we have this crazy neighbor of his, which he's like, dude, I'm not gonna freaking open the door for this woman. She's cat eater. I'm not gonna open the door for this woman. So all of a sudden, this woman is to mention like, hey, like, I went into my apartment and I saw that my cat was dead, and like I'm just kind of worried. Can you help me? And so the guy is like, well, I'm not sure if that was actually her that I saw, or maybe she's just a person that just saw something and like came back here just to like get some protection, some protection. So Hyun Soo is like, well, hey, how about this? How about you just stay out there and I'll call the police, so that way they can help you. They can deal with this. So the woman's like, why can't you just let me into your apartment? Like, come on, like I just need to feel safe. And so eventually the guy like doesn't call the cops, but he's like, you know what? How about this? How about you show me your arms? Like, that'll resolve everything. Show me your arms. Show me your these things. Show me a little bit of this. Show me a little skin, you know what I'm saying? And so the girl is like, well, why? And then she, like, her nose is just bleeding, covered with blood. And then, like, her eyes are, like, all weird and creepy. And then eventually her face just starts to, like her face just, like, and eventually she heads into one of the other neighbors to try to get it into, like, her house or her apartment. And like that ends up freaking out some other girl, and so uh, eventually what ends up happening is that Hyung Soo is to eventually go and like break off this like stick, and then eventually go out there just kind of like like I'm gonna defend myself. I'm like, dude, like that stick isn't even sharp. Like if anything, you're maybe gonna like push the woman away. But so here's the goofy thing. So this guy goes out there with this stick, and all of a sudden this detective guy is like, "Well, this looks like a lot of blood. Like, did you kill some? Like that's what I was saying. Did you kill somebody down here? It's a lot of blood down here. What's going on?" But no. So all of a sudden, this kid ends up just falling over. He faints because I guess he's all the blood just fainted him, I guess, fainted him down to the ground. So that's not just weird enough. You know what I'm saying? That's not weird enough. So so eventually what ends up happening is I guess there was to be these cages set onto this apartment complex, like all the cages, that way no one could get in or out in front of the exits and entry doors of this apartment complex. And I guess there was some store that I guess was like still like locked because they're like, hey, why is this store still closed? Like, and so eventually they end up coming up with some kind of interesting way to get this door unlocked while there's some guy wearing a wig. And so they're like, oh, okay, so we'll like it's kind of weird that this store is closed, but whatever, I guess. So eventually, what ends up happening is we end up getting one guy who is to eventually go on and is to try and open the main gate of this hotel complex so everyone can just get in, get out willy nilly to this apartment complex. And so one guy has to open this gate, and so all of a sudden there seems to be a very tall man standing in front of the doors. And so they're like, okay, like what's up with this guy? Shouldn't you have thought that they would have just kind of tested out like a big, giant, massive, tall man? Wouldn't you think they would have just said like, hey man, you want to just scoot off? You want to just back away there, buddy? Like they should have just been like, hey man, like do you want to get into the complex? No, no, you can't say anything. You're not talking. Oh, hey, you're bleeding a lot. Weirdly, maybe you should just bye. Go away, please. So they end up raising the cage thing that is to let them be able to choose whether or not they want to go outside of this apartment complex. And so all of a sudden we end up having this huge, massive, tall of a man all of a sudden use his head to just bash through this door. I'm like, shouldn't these doors be like without flimsy glass on them? But I guess they never really thought that far, right? So because they don't have like plexiglass in this thing, they're not made of money. So all of a sudden this big, huge, tall of a man all of a sudden just like drops his jaw, like meaning that he just basically loses it. And then all of a sudden he ends up having this huge long thing of a tongue that is to just be coming on out. And all of a sudden it's to be like grabbing people and sucking the life out of people. And then they're like, okay, maybe this guy should just go away. So we end up having one person who is really intelligent and ends up grabbing a fire extinguisher and ends up continuing to blow onto this zombie guy. And this zombie guy is like, argh, so he ends up backing away. And so the guy with the fire hydrant is to tell the guy who pushed the main gate in the first place, hey man, when I tell you when, just quickly close this gate. Just go ahead and just quickly just close this thing. So all of a sudden the guy is to eventually have this fire hydrant or fire extinguisher thing, and he's blowing on this guy. And so eventually what ends up happening here is we all of a sudden have this firefighter that is to kind of help this zombie get freaking away from these people and decide to just bugger off because it can't go and attack any more of these people. So it just basically just F's off. And so now it seems that there's a decent like opening here that if eventually a zombie is strong enough, they can probably just easily get into this apartment complex. So we'll see how they kind of like prepare that whole doorway for zombies to not come in it, or eventually they might just be like, dude, hey man, the first floor is effed. Like let's just like fortify this place off via the second floor and up. Like if you want to get anything, just rooftop rope your way down, and then that's just in case there's actually zombies that aren't in certain locations and whatever. So we'll see how they plan things out. Let's see how they try to maybe escape, or they maybe just bunker down and they're like, F this. So so eventually we are to realize that all heck is breaking loose, that the world is going to end. And so the last thing that we really see in this episode is Hyung Soo eventually going and looking out his window to see like tons and tons of birds just all flying in one direction. And we end up seeing Hyung Soo, who ends up having a gusher of a nosebleed. And I'm like, oh no, is he going to become a zombie? Or is this just eventually everyone is just going to get these weird nosebleeds that eventually will, like, they either just have a nosebleed because when they die, eventually they will become infected, or will this be the sign that anyone who's going to have a gusher of a nosebleed is going to become a zombie? And eventually we'll figure that out when I watch more of this show. But yeah, coming to some conclusions of my own, not knowing anything about this show. So eventually we'll get there. Eventually we'll because there were some interesting spots about this show that I did like, but we'll see how this plays out. And plus also, I know I probably didn't do this review perfectly. There was probably stuff that I forgot about. And plus also there was I wanted to get to the more intriguing parts. In all actuality, there's a lot of there's a lot of putzing around here. I want to see how this eventually just starts to really play out and gets hopefully really exciting the further along we go about this. So with that said, I think I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. If there's anything that I probably forgot about within this first episode, more than likely I'll probably have the rebuttal probably in the next review, or I'll probably just be like, meh, oh well. So, yeah. So I'm going to keep going on to this. If people seem to view this enough, or if this intrigues people enough, I'll probably watch it regardless. I do have a lot of shows going on right now, some brand new ones. So eventually I will definitely start to get to especially some easy ones where it's not 20 or 30 shows for one season or something like that. So this one seems easy enough to accomplish. So I should probably be getting back to this either every other day or something like that. Because I know that probably tomorrow I'm going to have certain kind of brand new kind of stuff out. So this might be an every other day one. We'll kind of see how this all plays out. So, but I'll keep coming back to this one for sure. So, bye everybody. Bye everybody.